morning or afternoon, dear friends. I'm so excited to be coming to you all the way from the United States to share some ideas and missives with you. I'm sorry we couldn't get together when I was there in Albania, albeit briefly. I had a beautiful time in both Durrës and in Tirana. The topic that we were going to do for you was called Executive Transformation, Trading Good for Better. And I was asked to produce a video, and some of it will obviously be translated, so I'm going to try to make the best I can of my time with you. But here's my promise. As we look at this topic and as we try to understand some of the precepts within it, my promise is that I'm going to come back there very soon. I fell in love with the country of Albania. The little time I got to spend there was so magical. You people are so hospitable. The host at the church, the lunch we had, the dinners we had. Your food, spectacular. The scenery, breathtaking. The history, awe-inspiring. But now our topic is going to switch to that of executive transformation. I'm obviously coming to you at a time of great global peril. There is so much going on in the world today that most of us are nervous or apprehensive about what tomorrow will bring. And as a result of that, how do you trade the good in our lives for better? That's a hard thing to fathom right now when most of what we are seeing in the world actually seems bad. So let's look at the word transformation. What does it mean to be transformed? There is an intrinsic motivation that exists in all of us that wants us to connect with our inner self to begin to change who we are into something that God created us to be. We are tridimensional as a species. That simply means there are three dimensions to our existence. We are mental in that we've been given a mind that can make the complex simple, that can understand the difficult and produce solutions, that can take the mundane and make it happy. That's the mind. We are physical in that we occupy space in this world, and alongside you in your country, in the city of Tirana where they say there are 1 million people, in the world there are 7.85 billion people. Which means we have a physical presence in this world that warrants us to navigate through it in some way. And then there is a spiritual attribute. All of us believe in something. Some of us may not believe in God per se, but all of us believe in something that allows us to put one foot in front of the other. So when I look at executive transformation and I try to look at it through the lens of being mental, physical, and spiritual, the first premise I want to offer up to you in how do you trade good for better is start thinking that the future is actually now. What do you mean by that? We have arrived in a very modular society. And if you want to think modular, the best illustration I can give you that is a corporate illustration would come from the Dell computer company. When Michael Dell started the Dell company all those years ago, he had a modular idea. In those days, the personal laptops or the personal computers were quite expensive, and the average person could not afford them, even though they were called personal computers. Most of the costs were upwards of $1,500. Now this is a good 20 years ago. Michael Dell comes along with the idea of saying the future is now. If we're going to make a computer fit on everybody's house, we need to create a modular mindset, which means in order to get excellence, I have to break up the whole. Which means we're not going to have one place that does everything. My engineers may be in Sunnyvale, California. The chip may be made in Taiwan. The code may be written in India. The help center may be in Vietnam. The cardboard boxes may come from someplace else. But we will bring all of this together in modular excellence and put it on a conveyor belt in Austin, Texas. Which means in those days you could go on a computer and order yourself a computer online. Or call them up and tell them what you need and they would put it together. They saw that if they broke up the whole into small manageable parts that were each excellent in their own output, something magical would happen. And yes, they managed to bring the cost of that personal computer way, way down, and Dell became a household name, and by the age of 40, he was a billionaire. It was a radical concept. My mentor Zig Ziglar always said, earthquakes and hurricanes get all the publicity, but termites do more damage. And I know that illustration is much closer to home because you just had a devastating earthquake there. But the rebuilding has begun, and I met some of the people who came out into the streets to help other people. What did they do? They broke down the hole into manageable parts so that the rebuilding could take place. One person got involved in relief efforts of food, another got involved in relief efforts of mattresses, someone else said, we will provide shelter, the government intervened. And all of this to understand that if you want excellence, realize that we are modular. The second component in transformation is realizing that there is a virtual component to that which we do. Right now, again, amidst this global crisis, and it's fascinating to talk about these things right now because they've been predicted since times before. Every day when you get on Facebook or you get on any of the social media platforms, you see one stream of consciousness that is negative, talking about all the things that could have been done that were not done. Another stream of consciousness that talks about it in a positive way or a semi-positive way, but not offering any solution, saying, hey, you know what? It could be worse. But we are in a virtual world. And in this virtual world, through which I'm now appearing to you all the way across the oceans by way of a video, most of us are aimlessly going through digital pages, and our confusion is stemming because we don't know what to believe. Everything seems urgent, everything seems critical. I would ask you to do one thing in this virtual world. Ask yourself, what is the non-negotiable in your life? What is the one thing in your life that you are not going to change? See, in my case, it's my belief in God. I truly believe that there is a God, and I truly believe that He operates in the universe and He understands and orchestrates the universe. I also believe that what God does not ordain, He allows. That's not a theological statement, it's just a practical statement. Because in spite of the bad I see around me, I don't let my belief in something superior go away. Otherwise, what else do we have left to cling to? So in this virtual world, I would look for the virtual truths that are also existent. Try to find information that is good, clean, pure, powerful, and positive. If you want to transform that mind and do some amazing things, I would encourage you to start reading books. One of the pieces of advice I give to people all over the world is simply this. I simply tell them that every year, try to read 4 biographies. In fact, I brought back a book from one of your celebrated authors, and I'm now learning about the siege that had taken place and how your national hero, Skanderbeg, in that castle, in that fort, fought them off for almost 25 years. Read biographies, read inspirational biographies. But here's a caveat. Also read one biography of a person you thoroughly disagreed with. So in your mind, as you begin to transform, you're constantly putting forth this battle of good versus evil. You will see that good always does triumph and evil is always vanquished. So first, in this transformation and understanding that the future is now, realize that there is a modular need for excellence. Second, assimilate into this virtual world by also making sure that you are disciplined to do some amazing things in this virtual world. Third, engage in a consultative approach. What does that mean? In any room, there is not one person who is smarter than all the people in that room put together. And I come from a sales background, and I've always believed. In fact, right before I did this video, I did a worldwide webinar with another gentleman who I admire deeply. An illustration I use comes from the Holy Bible, and it simply says this. In a consultative world of leadership, always have someone like a Paul to look up to. This would be the wise people in your world. See, knowledge is learned, wisdom is lived. We have more knowledge right now than at any other time in human history. The largest percentage of educated people seemingly messing up the planet. So have a wise person like Paul to look up to. Find a Timothy to leave it to, which just means that you're learning so that you can pass off that knowledge and be a conduit of that wisdom. And then third, find a Barnabas to be encouraged by. When I look at transformation, I really do feel that the motivators in our lives are the most important people who can help us. Have an encouragement that comes from an inner circle that is consultative in nature. What do I mean by this? These are people who can look at you and be constructive in their criticism to you by pointing out your faults, not because they want to be a fault finder, but they want to point out your faults so they give you a solution to let go of those faults so you can rise. That's a constructive critic. Destructive critics will come without you inviting them. These are people who just come and tell you that everything is wrong. Being a positive thinker myself, I like to find the consultative approach by finding the constructive critics. Number 4 in this future is now mindset of executive transformation. Be customer focused. Now, what does customer focus simply mean? A customer is any person you come in contact with who can positively or negatively impact a situation. So when you go to the store, when you go to buy something, when you go to the bakery to buy bread, when you go to the coffee shop to have a cup of coffee, whatever it is, you're engaging in a service experience. And so for the exchange of your monetary items that you have, they will give you a good or service. And as a result of that, some pleasantry of thank you or hello or welcome is exchanged. That's customer service. I would encourage you to try to make sure that you are customer focused in both your professional and personal lives. Our families are not our customers, but they are the recipient of our service attitude. In fact, I use a biblical model by simply saying, try to bend so low that you only see the feet of the people you're engaging with, that they look over you and see a God who may have sent you. Now, one of the things people always ask me when I make my presentations is, why is religion an important attribute of your character? See, in my own personal transformation, there was a time in my life where I believed a different worldview, or I believed that God didn't exist, or I believed that God wasn't real. Around 1993, when I went through the transformation of embracing the fact that there is a Savior of the world, and He is the only way that we can overcome the sin of this world, I began to realize that there has to be some order. So the way I look at my focus attributes is very simple. I try to realize that everybody I'm interacting with had a beginning, they came from somewhere, has an ending, they'll go somewhere. There's a right and a wrong in how I'm going to deal with them, and there's a purpose for why I must act with them. So I want you to look at it through that lens. Remember when we started, we talked about being mental, physical, and spiritual. That's all this is. This is that spiritual dimension. Embrace the spiritual dimension and you'll be a better son to your parents. You'll be a better husband to your wife. Someone asked me, how does faith work in your marriage? Now, I've been traveling a lot. Some of you who met me know that I spend a lot of nights away from home. I've been traveling for 30 years. In fact, I'm looking at this crisis that has enveloped the world right now as my happy time, because for the first time in my adult life that I can remember, I will be home for 2 straight months, having not gotten on a plane to go anywhere. But in those days when I was on the road and when I was lonely and when we were apart, I always decided that I would not look at my wife through my eyes. I would look at her through the eyes of a God who redeemed and rescued me. That allows me to then see someone who is forgiven, someone who has purpose, someone who has that conviction in their own heart. So that's just a personal nature. Now, whether you add God to the equation or not is not the fundamental premise for this, but it is a very paramount need. And lastly, realize that we are living in times of unbelievable disruption. Now, I had the privilege of writing a book called Hard-Headed, Soft-Hearted, and it's available on Amazon. Hard-Headed, Soft-Hearted. I wrote this book with the former president of Microsoft, a big company you've all heard of. And Rick Belluzzo, my friend, had often told me, he says, we are living in the most disruptive time in human history. Technology as we know it begins to change its gestation period every so often. Things that were novel last year are no longer a novelty this year. Things that we looked at 10 years ago are bygones. And yet some of the most disruptive technologies that we have seen, or disruptive industries that we have seen, came out of this time where people believed that they needed to make a transformation for a future they couldn't see. Think about it. Airbnb seems to have the largest amount of rooms in the world, and yet they don't own a single property. Uber has the largest number of cabs in the world, and they don't own a single cab. Which means these are all disruptive ideas that someone came up with as they looked at monolithic structures and said, how do we challenge the status quo? Now, those are all business principles at the foundation level. Let me give you 4 moods that will hopefully give you a little more clarity. Why should we make this trade? Why should we transform? Why should we go from good to better? What is the need? Why can't we just go through status quo? You can. In a book called Top Performance that I had the privilege of writing with Zig Ziglar, the legendary motivational speaker, Mr. Ziglar and I, we articulated this principle that 97% of the people in this world operate in the comfort zone. 3% operate in the effective zone. The difference between comfort and effectiveness is growth, and growth is uncomfortable. So I want to give you 4 quick moods, and hopefully then we'll be done. The first is the culture is changing quite radically. So there is a method to the cultural madness, and you need to adapt. We have become large migrant populations. The world is moving at rapid pace. Information is going at breakneck speed. So first, understand the necessity of this trade is because culture is rapidly changing. Second is the medium of technology. We addressed it to some degree, but make technology your friend. Most of you have a smartphone. In fact, we got more time-saving devices now than we've done in any other time in human history. Largest percentage of people not getting anything accomplished because they don't know how to manage time. Use technology to your advantage. I'm a time miser, but I don't take my phone upstairs at night, but when I come down, it's the first thing I see. But the reason I'm sharing that with you is there's sometimes you got to distance yourself from the gadgets so you can have peace of mind. But when you're around your gadgets, use them to your advantage. Don't become a slave of technology, become a master of technology. In fact, a seminar recently was conducted on corporate theft. When they asked people, what do you think is the #1 thing stolen in companies? And someone came up with the answer that the #1 thing stolen is time. And the reason they're stealing time is because of their inability to master technology. You go searching for something and land on something that is more scintillating, and you stay there, and now you have ruined your day. Be disciplined. Make yourself a master of technology. Use it to your advantage. There's a saying that when you have discipline at your side, it will encourage you. It will make you better. Then the mood of demand. There are 3 primary moods that humanity experiences. We're mad about something, glad about something, sad about something, and the 4th is fear. The 3 primary ones are mad, glad, sad. The 4th is afraid. But let's look at the 3. The demand that is out there at any given time takes you through these 3 moods. You're mad about something, glad about something, sad about something. So I'm going to give you an illustration that came from leadership expert Simon Sinek. He says that when you look at the mood of demand, just change your narrative. And the illustration he gives is very simple. He says the big corporation that advertises and the woman that is homeless and standing on the side of the street with a sign saying, please feed me, is also advertising. Both of them have a sign. One says, buy my product. The other says, hey, feed me. He went to the woman who was homeless and said, will you permit me to change your narrative? What does that mean? He said, let me look at your sign, which just says, I'm hungry, I'm unemployed, I'm homeless, I'm a single mother, whatever. He says, let me change your sign to simply say, if you only donate to the poor and the needy once a month, next time consider me. Why is that important? See, in changing the narrative, you understand the mood of demand. In the first scenario, when you look at the big corporation that has an advertisement saying, buy my product, they're focused on you, the buyer. In the woman who's holding the sign, she's focused on herself, the seller. When he changed the sign, he's now focused back on the buyer. That's important because buyers have 3 moods. They're either mad that they can't participate, they're sad that they are willing to participate but can't afford to, or they're glad they don't need to participate. It's a vital understanding, and I know it's complex, but hopefully you'll send me an email or talk to your folks who gave you this video in the translation. Hopefully they'll reach out to us. But change your narrative to cater to the mood. Change your narrative realizing that there are three primary moods. We're mad, we're glad, we're sad. Change the narrative for being a seller focus, me, I, to buyer focus, saying, hey, I want to focus on you. And lastly, the message of society. Anthropology is showing us that we are evolving, but we're also devolving at the same time. Our marriages are more strained than they've ever been. Alcoholism is on the rise. Drug abuse is rampant. Unemployment is getting to record levels. And in a lot of places, it's because people have given up, not because they don't want to participate. They have decided what their demand is going to be, and if the demand is not met, they would rather forsake their dignity and remain idle than participate in some kind of meaningful demand. I've often said, if I lose my ability to do what I do and feeding my family required me to dig a ditch, I'd be the best ditch digger there was. I would dig a hole and I would want the manager to come and say, hey, that's the best hole that was ever dug. I need to talk to you about something else. The only way you'll get noticed is to go to where you think success is and prove yourself. You know, you folks play a lot of soccer where you are, and if you go to a football match, when you go to a football match, you'll understand what I'm saying. Every football match, every soccer match has 50,000 people who need exercise yelling at 22 people who need rest. Life is not a spectator sport, it is a participator sport. So again, as we wind this one up, I want you to simply look at the things we talked about in that the future is now. We need to engage in a modular world, a virtual world. We need to get disciplined. We need to participate and understand the four moods. Hopefully I'll be in your midst sooner than later. My plan is as soon as all of this thing dies down, we'll be on the first plane back to Tirana and in your midst. Thank you all. God bless.